The spring of 1884 brought more than just wildflowers to the Comanche reservation in Indian Territory. It brought decisions that would change lives forever. Ayana sat on a wooden stool outside her family's small cabin, watching her mother prepare the traditional wedding dress that she was supposed to wear in just 2 days. The beaded patterns caught the morning sunlight, but all Ayana could see was a beautiful prison dot at 18 years old. She had dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of what others expected from her. While other girls her age were excited about marriage and starting families, Ayana found herself looking toward the horizon, wondering what lay beyond the rolling hills that surrounded their home. She had always been different, and everyone knew it. Her father, Chief Running Bear, was a respected leader who had guided their people through some of the hardest times they had ever faced. The white man's government had taken most of their land, forced them onto this small piece of territory, and promised them things that never came. Food was scarce, and the monthly rations from the government barely lasted 2 weeks. Many families were struggling just to survive. Running Bear believed that strong alliances between families could help their people weather these difficult times. That's why he had arranged for Ayana to marry Broken Arrow, a warrior who was already 38 years old and had buried 2 wives before her. The marriage would unite 2 influential families and potentially bring more resources to both households, but Ayana had spent 3 years at the missionary school where she learned to read and write in English. She discovered stories about women in faraway places who made their own choices, who traveled the world, and who decided their own futures. These stories planted seeds in her mind that grew stronger every day. The night before last, she had tried one final time to speak with her father about her feelings. She found him sitting by the fire, smoking his pipe and staring into the flames with tired eyes that had seen too much change. "Father," she said quietly in their native tongue, "my heart feels heavy about this marriage." Running Bear looked up at his youngest daughter, the one who had always asked too many questions and dreamed too many dreams. "Ayana, these are not times for following our hearts. These are times for doing what must be done to survive. Broken Arrow is a good man who will protect you and provide for you. But I don't love him, Father. I barely know him." The old chief's expression grew stern. "Love is a luxury we cannot afford right now. Our people are dying from hunger and sickness. The white man's government gives us less food each month. Broken Arrow has cattle and horses. This marriage will help both our families." Ayana felt tears burning her eyes, but she held them back. "What if there's another way? What if I could find work in town, earn money to help our family?" Her father's voice rose slightly, something that rarely happened. "A Comanche woman working for white people? They would never accept you, and our people would be ashamed. You will marry Broken Arrow, and you will be grateful for the security he offers." That conversation had ended their discussion, but it had not ended Ayana's inner turmoil. She spent the following day helping with wedding preparations while her mind raced with possibilities. Every time she looked at the wedding dress, her chest felt tight, as if she couldn't breathe properly. Broken Arrow came to visit that afternoon, bringing gifts for her family. He was not unkind, but he was a stranger to her. When he looked at her, she felt like he was seeing property rather than a person. He spoke to her father about cattle and weather, but barely addressed her directly. When he did speak to her, it was to ask simple questions about her ability to cook certain dishes or mend clothes. Her mother, White Dove, seemed to understand her daughter's reluctance but felt powerless to change anything. That evening, as they prepared the final details for the ceremony, White Dove pulled Ayana aside. "I know this is difficult, my daughter. But sometimes we must walk a path we did not choose in order to reach a destination we need to reach." "But what if the path leads somewhere I don't want to go, Mother?" White Dove touched her daughter's face gently. "Then you find ways to make that place better, or you find the strength to change direction later. But right now, this is what must happen." As night fell on the day before her wedding, Ayana lay on her sleeping mat, listening to her family's steady breathing around her. Her 2 older brothers had already moved out and started their own families. Her parents slept peacefully, trusting that tomorrow would bring a solution to some of their problems through this marriage alliance, but Ayana's mind was anything but peaceful. She thought about the stories she had read at school about people who had risked everything to find freedom. She thought about the wide world beyond the reservation, where she had never been allowed to go. She thought about spending the rest of her life cooking meals for a man she didn't love, bearing his children, and pretending to be happy while her spirit slowly died. The more she thought, the more she realized that she couldn't go through with the ceremony. She couldn't stand before her people and promise to honor a man she barely knew. She couldn't pretend that this was the life she wanted when everything inside her was screaming for something different. Around midnight, when she was certain everyone was deep in sleep, Ayana quietly rose from her mat. Her heart was pounding so loudly she was afraid it might wake someone. She gathered her few personal possessions, a change of clothes, her English reading book, a small knife her grandfather had given her, and some dried meat she had been saving. She also took the small amount of money she had earned by doing beadwork for other families, money she had been planning to give to her parents as a wedding gift. Now, she hoped it might help her survive whatever lay ahead. Moving like a shadow, she slipped out of the cabin and into the cool spring night. The moon was only half full, providing just enough light to see the path, but not enough to make her easily visible to anyone who might be watching. As she walked away from the only home she had ever known, tears finally came. She loved her family deeply, and she knew her disappearance would bring them shame and worry. She understood that they would face questions from the community and anger from Broken Arrow's family. But she also knew that if she stayed and went through with the marriage, a part of her would die that could never be brought back to life. The reservation was quiet except for the sounds of night animals and the distant barking of a dog. Ayana had grown up exploring every trail and creek in the area, so she knew exactly which direction would take her farthest from home the fastest. She headed east, toward the rising sun and the unknown world that lay beyond the boundaries of everything familiar. With each step, her fear mixed with something else she had never felt before, the terrifying but exhilarating sensation of making her own choice regardless of the consequences. She was no longer walking the path others had chosen for her. For the first time in her life, she was walking her own path, even though she had no idea where it would lead. The first night of freedom was the longest night of Ayana's life. She walked steadily eastward, using the stars to guide her direction just as her grandfather had taught her during their hunting trips years ago. Every sound made her heart jump. Was that a horse's hoofbeat behind her? Was someone following already? Each time she stopped to listen, she heard only the wind moving through the grass and the distant call of night birds. By dawn, her feet were sore and her water was running low, but she had covered many miles. She found a small grove of trees near a creek and decided to rest during the daylight hours. The wedding ceremony would be starting soon back home, and she could imagine the chaos her absence would create. Her mother would discover her missing sleeping mat first. Then the frantic search would begin. Ayana tried not to think about her parents' faces when they realized what she had done. Instead, she focused on the immediate challenge of survival. She had never been this far from home alone, and the reality of her situation was starting to sink in. She had no plan beyond getting away, no destination in mind, and no idea how she would find food or shelter. The creek water was cold and clean, which helped wash away some of her exhaustion. She used her small knife to dig up some wild roots she recognized as edible, though they tasted bitter and provided little nourishment. As the sun climbed higher, she found a hidden spot among some bush where she could sleep without being seen by anyone who might pass by, but sleep came in short, restless periods. Every few minutes she would wake with a start, listening for voices or horses. By the second evening, when she resumed walking, her legs felt shaky and her stomach was cramping from hunger. The dried meat she had brought was almost gone, and she hadn't been successful in finding much food along the way. The landscape was changing as she moved further east. The familiar rolling hills of home were giving way to different terrain, with more trees and different plants. Sometimes she recognized edible berries or roots, but often she passed things by because she wasn't certain they were safe to eat. Her mother had taught her about many plants, but not about the ones that grew in this area. On the third night, rain began to fall. At first, Ayana was grateful because it meant she could collect fresh water in her small container. But the rain didn't stop, and soon she was soaked through her clothes. The temperature dropped, and she began shivering uncontrollably. She looked for shelter under trees, but the branches provided little protection from the steady downpour. Walking became more difficult as the ground turned muddy. Her moccasins, which had served her well on dry ground, offered little grip on the slippery earth. Several times she fell, covering her clothes with mud and using precious energy to get back up. By morning, she was exhausted, cold, and starting to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, 20-6-year-old Tom McKenna was facing his own struggles on his small ranch about 15 miles east of where Ayana was wandering. Tom had come to this territory 3 years earlier with big dreams and what he thought was enough money to build a successful cattle operation. But a harsh winter had killed most of his herd, leaving him with barely enough animals to justify. Calling it a ranch. Tom was the kind of man who didn't give up easily. His Irish father had taught him that hard work could overcome most problems, and his Scottish mother had passed down a stubborn streak that kept him going when things looked hopeless. But lately, even his natural optimism was being tested. The bank in the nearest town was asking questions about his loan payments, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on to the land. That morning, the same storm that was making Ayana's journey miserable was also causing problems for Tom's remaining cattle. Several of them had wandered away from their usual grazing area, probably looking for better shelter from the rain. Tom pulled on his heavy coat and hat, saddled his horse, and rode out into the storm to bring them back. The wind was getting stronger, and visibility was poor. Tom had to ride carefully, watching for holes or rocks that might injure his horse. He had been searching for nearly 2 hours when he spotted his missing cattle near a creek that ran through the eastern part of his property. But as he got closer, he saw something else that made him stop and stare. There was a person lying motionless on the creek bank. At first, Tom thought it might be someone who had been thrown from a horse or hurt in some accident. He dismounted quickly and approached carefully, not sure what he would find. The person was a young woman, and she was clearly not from around these parts. Her clothes were different from anything the local women wore, and her long black hair was woven with beads and small ornaments that Tom had seen before only in his dealings with Native American traders. She was unconscious, soaked through, and shivering badly. Tom faced a difficult decision in that moment. He knew that tensions between the local white settlers and the Native American tribes were high. Many of his neighbors would not look kindly on him helping someone from the reservation. There could be legal problems, social problems, and even danger if tribal members came looking for her and thought he had done something wrong. But as he looked at the young woman's face, he saw someone in desperate need of help. She couldn't be more than 18 or 19 years old, and she was clearly in serious trouble. Whatever had brought her to this place in this condition, she needed immediate assistance if she was going to survive. Tom had always believed that when someone needed help, you helped them first and worried about the consequences later. It was how he had been raised, and it was how he tried to live his life. He quickly removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around the unconscious woman, then carefully lifted her onto his horse. The ride back to his cabin seemed to take forever. The woman remained unconscious, and Tom wasn't sure if that was from exhaustion, cold, or something more serious. He talked to her softly as they rode, even though she couldn't hear him, telling her that she was safe now and that he was going to help her. His cabin was small but warm, with a good stone fireplace that he kept burning during cold weather. Tom gently placed the woman on his only bed, then quickly built up the fire to warm the room. He found some dry blankets and extra clothes, though he had to turn his back respectfully while he helped her out of her wet garments and into something dry. For the rest of that day and into the night, Tom watched over his unexpected guest. He prepared some warm broth from beef bones and tried to get small spoonfuls into her mouth when she briefly regained consciousness. She seemed to be fighting a fever as she spoke words in a language he didn't understand. Though he recognized some of them as Comanche. Tom had learned a few Comanche words during his trading visits to the reservation, but not enough to understand what she was trying to say. All he could do was keep her warm, try to get some food and water into her, and hope that she would recover enough to tell him how she had ended up alone and nearly dead by the creek dock as he sat by the bed that first night, watching over someone whose name he didn't even know. Tom wondered what he had gotten himself into. But every time he looked at her face, he knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing was more important than doing the easy thing. Ayana woke up 3 days later in a place she didn't recognize. The walls around her were made of wood and stone, not the familiar animal hides of her family's home. Sunlight streamed through a small window as she could hear the sound of someone moving around outside. Her body felt weak, like she had been sick for a long time, but the fever that had clouded her mind was finally gone. She tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. That's when she noticed she was wearing clothes that weren't hers, a simple cotton dress that was too big for her small frame. Her own clothes were hanging on a rope near the fireplace, clean and dry. Someone had taken care of her, but who? The door opened, and a man stepped inside carrying a wooden bucket. He had brown hair that needed cutting, kind blue eyes, and clothes that showed he worked with his hands. When he saw that she was awake, he stopped suddenly as if he wasn't sure what to do next. "You're awake," he said in English, setting the bucket down carefully. "I was starting to worry you might not make it." Ayana understood his words, but speaking English felt strange after days of fever dreams in her native language. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "My ranch." "Well, what's left of it anyway?" "I'm Tom McKenna. I found you by the creek during that storm 3 days ago. You were in pretty bad shape." Tom moved slowly, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel frightened. He had spent the last 3 days wondering what would happen when she woke up. Would she be afraid of him? Would she try to run again? He had no idea what had brought her to his creek, but he could tell she had been running from something. "I should go," Ayana said, trying to stand up. But her legs wouldn't support her, and she sat back down heavily on the bed. "You need to rest." "More," Tom said gently. "You were sick with fever, and you're still weak? There's no rush to go anywhere right now." Ayana looked at this stranger who had helped her, trying to understand why he would risk trouble to care for someone he didn't know. In her experience, most white people either ignored Native Americans completely or treated them with suspicion and hostility, but this man seemed different. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Tom thought about her question for a moment. "Because you needed help." "That's reason enough." Over the next few days, they developed a careful routine. Tom would bring her food and water, check to make sure she was feeling better, and then give her space. He never asked personal questions about where she had come from or why she had been alone in the storm. Ayana was grateful for his respect, but she was also curious about this quiet man who lived alone on a struggling ranch. She noticed that Tom worked from dawn until dark, trying to care for a small herd of cattle with no help. His clothes were patched in several places, and his meals were simple, mostly beans, bread, and whatever vegetables he could grow in his small garden. It was clear that he was having his own difficulties. As she regained her strength, Ayana began to feel guilty about taking his food and occupying his only bed while he slept on the floor. She started helping with small tasks around the cabin, mending his clothes, preparing meals, and keeping the fire going. Tom seemed surprised by her help, but grateful for it. Communication between them was sometimes challenging. Tom knew only a handful of Comanche words he had picked up from trading, while Ayana's English, though functional, was formal and limited to what she had learned at the missionary school, but they found ways to understand each other through gestures, shared work, and patience. One morning, about a week after she had awakened, Ayana was outside gathering eggs from Tom's chickens when she heard horses approaching. Her heart started racing as she recognized the sound of multiple riders. She dropped the eggs and ran toward the cabin, but it was too late. 3 men on horseback came over the hill, and one of them was the local sheriff. Tom came out of the barn when he heard the horses. He walked calmly toward the riders, but Ayanna could see tension in his shoulders. She stayed near the cabin, ready to run if necessary, but knowing she was still too weak to get very far. "Morning, McKenna," the sheriff said, touching the brim of his hat. "We're looking for a missing Indian girl from the reservation. Young woman, about 18, disappeared on her wedding day. Her family's worried sick, and the tribal authorities have asked us to help find her." Tom's expression remained neutral. "Haven't seen anyone like that around here, Sheriff. What makes you think she might be in this area?" One of the other men, a neighbor named Peterson, spoke up. "Some folks saw smoke coming from your place when they knew you were in town last week. Figured maybe you had company." Ayanna held her breath, waiting to see what Tom would do. He had every reason to turn her in. Helping a runaway from the reservation could bring him legal trouble, and he was already struggling to keep his ranch going. It would be easier for him to just hand her over and avoid any problems. But Tom looked the sheriff straight in the eye and said, "I've been burning brush piles to clear more pasture land. That's probably what they saw. As for company, I haven't had any visitors except for you gentlemen." The sheriff studied Tom's face, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Peterson was looking around the ranch yard, and his eyes stopped on the clothes hanging on the line. Ayanna realized with horror that her Comanche dress was still there, drying in the morning sun. "Those are some interesting clothes you got hanging there, McKenna," Peterson said with suspicion in his voice. Tom didn't even glance toward the clothesline. "I do trading with various folks. Sometimes I take clothes in payment for beef or milk. That dress has been hanging there for months, planning to trade it back to someone who might want it." It was a quick lie, but Tom delivered it so calmly that even Ayanna almost believed it. The sheriff seemed satisfied with the explanation, but Peterson continued looking around suspiciously. "Well, if you do see anything unusual, you let us know," the sheriff said. "The girl's family is offering a reward for information about her whereabouts. They just want her home safe." After the men rode away, Tom and Ayanna stood in uncomfortable silence. She knew that he had just lied to law enforcement to protect her, putting himself at risk. She also knew that her presence was creating problems for him that he didn't deserve. "Thank you," she said quietly. Tom nodded but looked troubled. "They'll probably be back, and they'll be asking questions around the area. People will be watching for anything unusual." Ayanna understood what he wasn't saying. Her being there was dangerous for both of them, but she also realized that she had nowhere else to go. If she left now, she would be in the same desperate situation she had been in when Tom found her by the creek. "I can leave tonight," she offered. Though the thought terrified her, Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring off toward the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and determined. "No, you're not strong enough yet, and you have nowhere safe to go. We'll figure this out together. But we need to be careful. Very careful." That evening, as they ate a simple dinner by the fireplace, they began to make plans. Ayanna would stay hidden during daylight hours when visitors might come by. She would help with ranch work that could be done out of sight from the main road. And they would both be ready to react quickly if searchers came back. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. For the first time since leaving her family's home, Ayanna began to believe that she might actually survive her choice to run away. And Tom, despite the risks and complications, found himself genuinely glad for the company on his lonely ranch. Summer turned to autumn, and the careful arrangement between Tom and Ayanna slowly transformed into something neither of them had expected. What started as a desperate rescue had become a true partnership. Working side by side every day, they discovered that their different backgrounds actually made them a stronger team. Ayanna's knowledge of plants and animals proved invaluable to the struggling ranch. She showed Tom which wild herbs could cure sick cattle and where to find the best grazing grass during dry spells. Her way with horses was remarkable. She could calm a frightened animal with just her voice and gentle hands. Under her care, Tom's few remaining horses became healthier and more manageable than they had ever been. Tom, in return, shared his knowledge of farming techniques and business practices. He taught Ayana how to read the territorial newspapers so she could understand the world beyond the ranch. Together, they planned improvements to the property and found ways to make their limited resources stretch further. Their communication had improved dramatically over the months. Ayana's English became more natural and relaxed, while Tom picked up enough Comanche words to understand basic conversations. Sometimes they would spend entire evenings talking by the fire, sharing stories about their different childhoods and discussing their hopes for the future, but their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed by the outside world. Mrs. Henderson, who lived on the neighboring ranch, had started watching Tom's property through her kitchen window with increasing curiosity. She noticed that his vegetable garden was producing more food than one person could manage, and that his horses looked better than they ever had before. One afternoon in late September, she decided to pay an unexpected visit. Ayana was inside the cabin, working on mending some of Tom's clothes, when she heard a woman's voice calling out in the yard. She quickly moved away from the window and hid behind the door while Tom went out to greet their visitor. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Henderson," Tom said politely. "What brings you by today?" Mrs. Henderson was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who prided herself on knowing everything that happened in the area. "I was just checking to see how you're doing, Tom. You seem to be managing your place much better these days." "Your garden looks wonderful, thank you. I've been learning some new techniques, trying different approaches." The woman looked around the ranch suspiciously. "Learning from whom?" "I don't recall seeing any visitors coming by." Tom kept his voice casual. "Books, mostly, and I've been experimenting on my own." Mrs. Henderson wasn't satisfied with that answer. She walked closer to the cabin, pretending to admire Tom's vegetable garden while actually trying to peek through the windows. "You know, Tom, there have been some strange stories going around town. People talking about seeing smoke from your place at odd hours, hearing voices when they pass by on the road." "People see and hear all sorts of things," Tom replied carefully, "especially when they're looking for something to talk about." The conversation was making both Tom and Ayana nervous, but it was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Fast, 4 riders came over the hill, and Ayana's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the lead rider. It was Broken Arrow, the man she was supposed to have married, along with 3 other warriors from her tribe. Mrs. Henderson stepped back nervously as the men rode into the yard. Broken Arrow dismounted and walked directly toward Tom, his face showing barely controlled anger. "I am looking for my wife," he said in heavily accented English. "She was taken from our people. Someone saw her in this area?" Tom stood his ground, though Ayana could see the tension in his posture. "I don't know anything about your wife. This is my property, and I live here alone." Broken Arrow's eyes scanned the ranch yard, taking in details that most people would miss. He noticed the 2 sets of footprints in the dirt near the well, the women's moccasins drying on a rock by the creek, and the smell of a type of bread that Comanche women made with wild roots. "You lie?" Broken Arrow said flatly. "She is here. I can feel her presence." From inside the cabin, Ayana was struggling with what to do. She could hear the conversation outside, and she knew that this confrontation had been inevitable. Broken Arrow would not give up easily, and other tribal members would keep coming back until they found her. She also realized that her hiding was putting Tom in real danger. If the tribal warriors decided he had stolen her or was keeping her against her will, they might take violent action against him. And Mrs. Henderson was standing there witnessing everything, which meant the whole community would know about this confrontation by evening, making a decision that terrified her. Ayana opened the cabin door and stepped outside. All eyes turned to her as she walked calmly toward the group of men. She was wearing one of Tom's old shirts and a simple skirt, but she carried herself with the dignity of the chief's daughter she had always been. "I am not your wife, Broken Arrow," she said in Comanche, her voice steady and clear. "I never was your wife, and I never will be." Broken Arrow's face showed surprise and anger. "You belong to me. Your father gave you to me in marriage. You ran away like a child, but now you must come home and fulfill your duties." "I belong to myself," Ayana replied, switching to English so Tom and Mrs. Henderson could understand. chose to leave, and I choose to stay here. This man did not steal me. He saved my life when I was dying, and he has treated me with respect and kindness." The warrior's hand moved toward the knife at his belt. "This white man has filled your head with lies. You will come with us now, or we will take you." That's... When Tom stepped forward, placing himself between Ayanna and the mounted warriors. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but his voice was calm and determined. "She just told you she's here by her own choice. That means she's under the protection of territorial law. If you try to take her against her will, you'll be breaking the law." Broken Arrow laughed bitterly. "White man's law means nothing to me. She is Comanche. She belongs with her people." "I am Comanche," Ayanna said firmly, "but I am also a person with the right to make my own decisions. I will not return to a marriage I did not choose. I will not live a life that makes me unhappy, just because it is expected." The standoff continued for several tense minutes. Mrs. Henderson had moved back toward her buggy, clearly frightened by the confrontation but unable to look away. The other tribal warriors remained mounted, waiting for Broken Arrow's decision. Finally, one of the older warriors spoke to Broken Arrow in their native language. Ayanna couldn't hear everything he said, but she caught enough to understand that he was reminding Broken Arrow about territorial laws and the consequences of taking violent action against a white settler. Broken Arrow's jaw was tight with frustration, but he seemed to realize that he couldn't simply take Ayanna by force without creating serious problems for his tribe. The territorial authorities were always looking for excuses to cause trouble for Native Americans, and kidnapping would give them exactly what they needed. "This is not over," he said to Ayanna. "Your father is ashamed. Your mother cries every day. You have brought dishonor to your family." Those words hit Ayanna harder than any physical blow could have. She loved her family deeply, and knowing that her choice was causing them pain was almost unbearable. For a moment she wavered, wondering if she should go back with them just to end their suffering, but then she felt Tom's hand gently touch her shoulder, reminding her that she wasn't alone anymore. She had found something here that was worth fighting for, not just her freedom, but a chance at happiness. "Tell my parents that I love them," she said quietly. "Tell them that I am safe and well cared for. And tell them that someday I hope they will understand why I had to make this choice." Broken Arrow remounted his horse, his face dark with anger and disappointment. "You have become lost to your people, Ayanna. When you realize your mistake, do not expect us to welcome you back." As the four warriors rode away, Mrs. Henderson hurried to her buggy and left without saying another word to Tom. Ayanna and Tom stood in the yard, both understanding that their secret was now completely exposed. By evening, everyone in the territory would know that Tom McKenna was sheltering a runaway Comanche woman. "What happens now?" Ayanna asked quietly. Tom looked at her with eyes full of determination and something else she was just beginning to recognize as love. "Now we figure out how to make this work, legally and permanently. Because I'm not giving up on us, and I hope you're not either." The weeks following the confrontation with Broken Arrow were some of the most challenging Tom and Ayanna had faced together. Word spread quickly through the territory about the Comanche woman living on McKenna's ranch. Some neighbors stopped speaking to Tom entirely, while others made it clear they disapproved of the situation by refusing to do business with him. The general store owner in town began charging Tom higher prices for supplies, claiming it was because of the extra risk involved in serving him. The local banker called in Tom's loan early, demanding immediate payment that Tom couldn't possibly make. It seemed like the whole community had decided to punish him for his choice to help Ayanna, but not everyone turned against them. Dr. Williams, the territory's only doctor, stopped by the ranch one afternoon with a surprising offer. He was an older man who had seen enough of life to judge people by their character rather than their circumstances. "I've heard the stories going around town," he told Tom and Ayanna as they sat on the front porch. "Most of it's nonsense, but I wanted to see for myself what was really happening here." Ayanna tensed, expecting another confrontation, but the doctor's manner was calm and respectful. He spent an hour talking with them, asking questions about their situation and listening carefully to their answers. "It's clear to me that you two have built something good here," he finally said. "But you're going to face more legal challenges if you don't make your arrangement official. The territorial authorities are already asking questions, and they're going to want answers." Dr. Williams explained that because Ayanna had left the reservation voluntarily, she might be able to claim rights as a territorial resident. But the process would require legal documentation and possibly a court hearing. He offered to help them navigate the complex legal system, knowing that they couldn't afford a lawyer. Meanwhile, Tom had been quietly researching territorial law in the books Dr. Williams lent him. He discovered that marriage between white settlers and Native Americans wasn't explicitly forbidden by territorial law, though it was strongly discouraged by social custom. If they could find an official willing to perform the ceremony, their union would be legally recognized. The bigger problem was finding someone willing to take that risk. Most judges and ministers in the territory wouldn't want to anger the community by performing such a controversial marriage. But Tom was determined to find a solution. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A traveling circuit judge named Judge Morrison was known for his fair treatment of all people, regardless of their background. Tom rode 2 days to the town where Judge Morrison was holding court, hoping to speak with him privately. Judge Morrison listened to Tom's story with interest. He had seen many unusual situations in his years of traveling the territory, and he prided himself on following the letter of the law rather than popular opinion. "The law is clear," he told Tom. "If the woman is of legal age and consents freely to the marriage, and if she's not bound by any existing legal obligations, then I can perform the ceremony. But I want to speak with her personally to make sure this is truly her choice." A week later, Judge Morrison arrived at the ranch. He spent a long time talking with Ayanna, asking her about her background, her reasons for leaving the reservation, and her feelings about marrying Tom. He questioned her in both English and the few Comanche phrases he knew, making sure she understood all the implications of her decision. "This marriage will make you a territorial citizen," he explained to her. "But it will also mean that you can never return to live on the reservation as a tribal member. Are you certain this is what you want?" Ayanna looked at Tom, who was standing nearby but letting her make this decision entirely on her own. Over the months they had spent together, she had come to understand that what she felt for him went far beyond gratitude for his help. He had shown her a different way of living, one where she could be valued for her thoughts and abilities, not just her role as someone's daughter or wife. "I am certain," she told the judge. "This man has given me more respect and kindness than I ever expected to find. We work well together, we care for each other, and we want to build a future together." The wedding ceremony took place on a crisp October morning in 1885. It was small and simple, with only Judge Morrison, Dr. Williams, and his wife as witnesses. Tom wore his best shirt and pants, while Ayanna wore a dress that Dr. Williams' wife had helped her sew from fabric Tom had bought in town. There were no flowers or fancy decorations, but as Tom and Ayanna spoke their vows to each other, both felt that this was one of the most important moments of their lives. Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife according to territorial law, and Dr. Williams signed the official papers as a witness. The legal marriage solved some of their problems, but created others. Now that Ayanna was officially Tom's wife and a territorial citizen, the authorities couldn't force her to return to the reservation. But the social pressure from their neighbors actually increased. Some people in town organized a boycott against Tom's ranch, trying to force other businesses to stop dealing with them. For a while, it looked like they might not be able to survive economically. But Tom and Ayanna had learned to be resourceful, and they found ways to work around the hostility. Ayanna's skills with horses attracted attention from ranchers in neighboring counties who hadn't heard about the controversy. Word spread about her ability to train difficult horses and cure sick animals. Soon, people were traveling from far away to seek her help, bringing much-needed income to the ranch. Tom expanded their vegetable garden using techniques Ayanna had taught him, and they began selling produce to restaurants and hotels in towns where they weren't known. Their combined knowledge and hard work slowly made the ranch more successful than it had ever been. The biggest change came in the spring of 1886, when their first child was born. Ayanna had been nervous about becoming a mother, but Tom was a devoted husband who supported her through everything. When their daughter arrived healthy and strong, they named her Luna Dawn McKenna, a name that honored the night sky that had guided Ayanna's escape and the new day that had brought them together. The baby's arrival softened some of the community's hostility. Even people who had opposed the marriage found it difficult to maintain their anger when they saw Tom proudly showing off his daughter in town. Children have a way of breaking down barriers that adults create. Ayanna proved to be a loving and capable mother, and Tom discovered that he enjoyed fatherhood more than he had expected. Their small family brought them joy even during difficult times, and their home became a place of happiness and laughter. Over the years, they had 4 more children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. Each child was raised to understand both sides of their heritage, learning Comanche traditions from their mother and Irish-Scottish customs from their father. They grew up speaking both languages and understanding that their mixed background made them special rather than different. Ayanna never forgot her birth family, and she maintained contact with them through letters when possible. Her younger brother eventually visited the ranch in secret, curious to see how his sister was living. When he saw her happiness and the success of the ranch, he returned home with stories that gradually changed his parents' feelings about her choice. Years later, when Ayanna's father was dying, he sent word that he wanted to see his daughter one more time. Tom accompanied Ayanna on the difficult journey back to the reservation, where she was able to make peace with her family before her father passed away. It was the closure she had long needed. Tom's ranch became one of the most successful operations in the territory. He eventually served in the territorial government, where he worked to improve relations between Native American tribes and white settlers. People began to see him not as the man who had defied convention, but as someone who had found a way to bridge 2 different worlds. Ayanna lived to be 89 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who carried on the strength and independence she had fought so hard to preserve. Her story became a local legend, proof that courage, love, and determination could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The ranch that had once been a place of struggle became a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over prejudice and love over fear.